Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to Fxmaniac. This is Syed Mahmoud Amiri again, and after a very long time, welcome to another Maya tutorial. So I've been wanting to do this series for a very long time. Now I think is a perfect time since Maya 2023 is released, and I'm going to be doing a series of tutorials on the basics all the way to the advanced level of Maya. Alright, so in this tutorial we're going to be talking about the basics of Maya, navigation, creating and editing objects, selecting, rotating and scaling objects, the outliner, grouping and parenting objects, and the different components of the object, some basic materials, and some fun stuff with the content browser. And finally, we're going to be creating a mini jungle with paint effects and mesh, and we'll be lighting the scene and rendering with Arnold. So I'm using Maya 2023 right now in this case. So when you open this, when you open Maya, you just basically get this thing, and you have getting started, and you have learning, so you can go and do that. Different learning resources, but we're just gonna go straight into Maya. And before getting started, I just want to say that I am going to assume that you've never used Maya before, so it's a complete beginner tutorial. We're going to start from the ground up and go all the way up to some of the advanced features of Maya through a series of video tutorials. But in this very first video, I just want to show you guys the basics. Alright, so just wanted to get that out of the way. So when you open Maya, you have basically a scene like this, right? So you have the menu, which is going to display the title of your project and the name, and we have different menus, different options here, and different shelves for doing different things. As you can see, sculpting, rigging, animation, effects. So Maya is a very vast and very powerful 3D application, mainly used for animation, modeling, and visual effects. So yeah. And then you have different workspaces here. So according to your needs, you can go ahead and choose a workspace that fits best what you're doing with it. So if you go to sculpting, it'll adjust it to sculpting. You can have UV editing, you can have Xgen, which we will going to be taking a look at all of them in future tutorials. But mainly we're going to be using the general, or probably it says like Maya Classic or something. So the general is fine. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be navigating through the scene, and we're going to learn how to do that. So in order to navigate, you basically hold down Alt and middle mouse click and drag. You can rotate the 3D view, so any way you want it, you can just rotate it. You can see here as well, so you can do that from here. And it shows you like the different views of your current perspective view. And then Alt middle click and drag is orbit. Alt lift click and drag is orbit. And if you hold down Alt and middle click and drag, you can pan the view, so up and down and left and right. And if you wanted to zoom in and zoom out, you can hold down Alt and right click and drag, so it'll zoom in and out. Or you can use the wheel of the mouse, which is a little bit more easier to do. Alright, so right now this is our perspective view. So if I hit spacebar, you can see that we have 4 different views, and the perspective view is actually like a 3D representation of your view. So if I add any object, so hitting that space on any view will just maximize it. So I'm just going to go maximize here. So if I wanted to add an object, you can go into create, polygonal primitives, and you can have different some geometric shapes and some different shapes. So I'm just going to add a torus for now, and I want to scale this up. So I'll just take the scale tool. I am going to explain these, but right now I just want to talk about the different views. So if you hit space, you have a different representation of your object from the top view, it says here, and from the front view and from the side view, so it's here. So you can maximize every view you want, or you can just, if you're in perspective, hold down space, go to Maya, and you can switch to different views. But the difference is these are orthographic views or 2D views, so combined they give us the perspective view. So if I hold space and click on Maya, and perspective, you have the perspective view. All right, so I hope you get it. And even if you don't get it, it's just fine. So just follow along. And it's the very first time you are probably you're opening Maya and you're using this 3D software. So it does make sense that you don't understand certain things, but you can always comment your questions or things you missed in the comment section, or you can just watch the tutorial, over and over again. So we've created this object, and now I want to move this object, right? So you have this move tool here, so you can go ahead and move it on y-axis or z-axis or x-axis, just like this. And if the gizmo is small, this is called the gizmo, by the way, the axes. So if it is small, you can go ahead and hit the plus icon to make it big so that it is easily available to you, or the minus icon to make it smaller. So depending on your needs, you can do that. So the one thing you might have noticed that already from the beginning that I didn't tell you guys is that my grid is looking a little different from yours, probably because yours might look like just a gray grid, but that's because I've changed my grid color. So you can go into display, and here's the grid. You can turn it off, by the way, if you want, but yeah, turn it on, and you can click on this little box next to it, and you can change the subdivisions. So apply it, and it'll be less. By default, it is like 5 or something, I believe. Yeah, and then you can increase it as well, or 5 is fine. And then you can change the color of the axes. So just apply it, and it'll be that color. All right. And you can change the numbers and the subdivision lines as well. So that's how I did that. So I'm just going to go back to this color, and I'm just going to leave it yellow for the main axes. All right. So there you go. That's how you move your objects. So you can also move it in both directions, the Z and the X, if you click here, or if you wanted to move it on the Z and X, and just like Z and Y and X and Z, X and Y, sorry. So yeah, but then you can also move it individually. All right. And then if you want to rotate your object, the same way goes with the rotation tool. So you just take the rotation tool and rotate it at every direction that you want, and just like this. And scale is the same, so make it bigger or smaller. But then there's also a shortcut for all of these tools. So if you want to move it, hit W for the move tool, just move it, hit E for rotate it, and hit R for scale and scale it. And when you create an object, you can also edit it through the channel box and the attributes editor. So you click here, you have the channel box and the attribute editor. The shortcut to switch between them is Control A. So I'm just going to be taking a look at the channel box here. So if I click here, you can see that the translate, all of these values are actually, you can change it. So if you set it to 10, it'll move out. But the quicker way would be to, if I select this and click on the viewport and drag with middle mouse and click, you can actually slide between the values of that parameter that you selected. So if I select on X, you can scale it, and also you can select multiple values by holding down Shift, and you can go ahead and click and drag with the middle mouse button to scale it up or down. All right. And these are the parameters for the translation of the object. You can also turn it off. Visibility is on, type off, and it'll be off. But then how do you select it, right? So then you have to go to Windows, Outliner, and it'll be there, the torus. Or you can just click here, it'll bring you the outliner. So you can just select it, and again, type on for the visibility, and it'll be there. All right. And you can also go with different views here, different sort of views, but I'm just going to prefer the perspective view. So you can also go into inputs, and we have the values for this sphere, for this torus, sorry. So you can increase or decrease the radius, the section radius, and twist them. So every object pretty much has its segments, subdivision axis, and subdivision height. So every object that you create, if I go into create primitives, and you have all these, and the one thing that I didn't mention is you can turn on this interactive creation, and that will allow you to create them like manually. So if I go with a torus, you can just, you see that it just didn't create it automatically. You just have to just drag it out and give it like some thickness and all that. So it's just interactive creation, all right, if you want to, but mostly I don't use it, so I just turn it off. And as I was saying, every object that you create, you have the properties here. So you can increase the radius, and I'm just clicking on it and middle mouse clicking and dragging to increase the radius, the subdivision, and everything. So every object, it has its own input values, all right? So I'm just going to move it and probably rescale the pivots by hitting plus and minus. All right, so that was basically the navigation and the, you know, sort of manipulating, moving, scaling, and rotating the object. All right, so that's basically it for you know, navigation and everything. And you also have the attribute editor, which has basically the same parameters, the translation values and all, and the sphere. You can also change the radius and everything, but it just gives you a lot more of parameters that are not available on the channel box, like, you know, some render settings and also the materials and everything. So that is basically where you can use the attribute editor, which we'll be using a lot during this tutorial and in the future tutorials. The one thing you can also do is you can also, like, you know, create multiple objects. So if I create a cube here and I hit R to scale it, and I can group these objects together. So let's say I wanted them to be together, so select them. So if you want to group these objects, you just select them both and go to edit, and we have group. So now they are together, and as you can see in the outliner, we have a group here, and inside the group we have both of them objects. You can also double click and rename it, so it's going to be the objects group, and that's basically it. Or you can ungroup them by just selecting both of them and middle clicking and dragging it out of the group. So you can just delete the group, and now we have both of these objects. You can also parent one object to another. So if you select this object, I want this to be parented to this. So first you select the child and then the parent, and then go to edit, parent. So now if I rotate the parent, which is the sphere, or scale it, it'll actually follow the movement and the translation of that you know, parent object. The cube is going to follow the translation of the sphere because it's a child of it, as you can see here. So you can also go ahead and middle click and drag it out of it. So now every object is independent. So we are going to be taking a look at these in the rigging and animation part of the series, but I just wanted to let you guys know that you can do those as well. So if I hit Control A, you can switch between the outliner and the channel box, and you can also drag everything and make it you know, customizable to your wish. Alright, so the other thing that I'm going to be talking about is the object components. So I'm just gonna, you can also, if you want to create objects, you can go create, and you have all these. You can also shift right click in the viewport, and you have all of the objects with you. So if I just create a cube here, and I hit R to scale it up and move it up here, if I right click, I have different components of that same object. So the object, different components that the object is made of. So alright, so then the first component that we're going to be taking a look at is a vertex. So a vertex is a single point which connects two lines together. So you can move it and, you know, change the shape of the object. You also have edges. So an edge is basically two vertex connected together, which is a line, and you can go ahead and change it, you know, and manipulate the shape of your object, which is this tool, this component is heavily used for modeling objects. So you basically start with the geometric and these basic shapes, and through manipulating and using all these tools, if I shift right click, you can model basically anything inside of Maya. All right. Then you have faces, which are, a combination of 4 vertices. It creates a surface. So a surface is called a face. It depends on different 3D programs. Some programs call it like polygons, and in Maya it's called faces. So you can also take faces and scale them down or up or rotate them and move them, whatever you want to do with them. All right. So I'm just going to be talking about some basic, modeling tools, and we will be having some dedicated videos towards them, but simply I just want to talk about some basic modeling tools. So every component has its own tools. So if I switch to vertex, shift right click, you see I have different tools. If I switch into edges and I select this, I have different tools. And if I switch to face, you can see that we have different tools. So for the faces, the most important and the most frequently used one is extrude. So you can basically go ahead and extrude. It just means that you can extrude it out or in, and you can also, move it and offset it, basically make it smaller or bigger, and basically you can also do it directly from the viewport. All right. So the shortcut for this would be to, if you hold down Shift and you move it, it's just going to extrude that face. All right, just like that. Or if you shift select multiple faces, you can also do it with scale. So you can just scale them down and you have another faces being extruded. And you can also hold down Shift and move it in, so you have this. All right. And basically for every face you can just do that. You can Shift and scale it down and hold down Shift and move it. I'm just pressing the shortcuts, by the way. So if you select this, hit R for scale, Shift and scale it down, just like that, and Shift and move it to extrude. All right. So I have this object, but if I hit 3, which is going to be the smooth mode, you can see that it's losing all of its details, and that's because we don't have any sort of support. We need support edges to support the shape and avoid it from collapsing. Again, this is a fairly advanced topic that we're going to be taking a look at the modeling part, but I'm just going to show you guys quickly how to maintain the shape. And the easier way would be to select all of these edges and just shift right click and bevel the edges. So you don't have to know these things, you just follow what I'm doing so that you get used to working in Maya. And then you have all these options. So you have how much they will bevel and how many segments you want. So I'll add 2 segments and I'll just increase the bevel and go back to object mode. So right click, object mode, and now you have it. So now if I hit 3, just the number 3, you can see that we have the object and it's maintaining its shape properly because we have support edges here. So if you don't see the wireframe, you can just go here and click on wireframe unshaded and you'll have this object. Again, we are going to be taking a look at all these tools in a fairly advanced way because these are the basics and the basis for modeling advanced and complicated objects. I just wanted to show you guys some modeling tools, and we have a bunch of them here that we will going to be taking a look at, a lot of them in a dedicated video tutorial. But for now, this is basically it. So now you want to give this object a material. So I'm just going to go right click and go into assign favorite material. You have all of them, but then I'm just going to add a blend. So a blend is basically a reflective material. So you can go into the attribute editor and go to the end, and here you have blend, or simply you can just right click and go to material attributes, and we have this. So you can change the color. So if I click here, you can change the color to any color that you want. We don't want to see the wireframe, so just turn it off from here. And you can increase the eccentricity, which is basically the the glossiness of the reflection and reflectivity. And then you have specular, so if you want how strong you want it to be, just like that. And it heavily depends on your light source. So we have this. You can also add a texture to the color, so click here and you can add a Maya texture or a file or whatever you want, you can just add it. Again, we will be taking a look at all of them in later tutorials, so we'll be having dedicated tutorials for everything, modeling, lighting, rendering, and everything. Alright, so I know that you are probably bored with this, and it is supposed to be because you're just getting started with Maya, but right now let's just get started with some interesting stuff. So if you want to, you can go ahead into the window. We have the content browser, so it's a very huge library of the different things that you have inside of Maya. So if I go into, you have animation, you have effects, you have modeling and paint effects and Bifrost and everything. So you have, milk pour simulations, Bifrost bridge fall simulation, and everything, which we'll be taking. I've already done some tutorials on it, but we will be doing a series on this version of Maya as well. So I'm just going to go with effects and start off with effects presets. So I have a disintegration effect. If I double click on it, you can go ahead and see that we have a torus. And if I play it, you can see it's already caching into the RAM because it's a simulation. And if I play this, you can see that it's disintegrating. And the reason it's playing so fast is because it's already cached. So I'm just going to go into this animation preferences, make sure play every frame, or you can go with 24 frames per second. So you will see the real-time sort of disintegration effect. We will be learning how to do this effect using NCloth. But for now, I'm just showing you guys that you have some really cool presets here. So what I'm going to do is just reset Maya, create new. You have some fireworks. So if I double click and play this, just like that, it's looking really nice. So these are done with particles, and create new scene again. And I'm just going to go into the content browser. So you have fluid examples, clouds, and explosions. So you have a nuke. So double click on this, and if I simulate this, you can see that it's actually a really nice sort of nuclear explosion. So you have these amazing presets inside of Maya. So if you just start out, you can take them, render them out, and brag to your friends about you made something cool in Maya. So just stop this, and basically you have this. So I'm just gonna reset again, and you have fire, you have clouds and fog, some other interesting stuff, liquids, smoke, space, nebulas, and sun and everything. You have a lot of different cool things. You have fluids, so you have ocean examples. And if you go to modeling, you have some basic objects. You have animals. So if I double click on this, so it's pretty big. I'm just going to zoom out and hit R and scale it down. So the grid is basically a very good scale that you want to put it in. So it's actually a very good guide to creating and placing your objects. And I think it is in centimeters, so I'm not very sure about it. So you have this object, and you can scale it, or just hold down shift and take a copy, select them and hit 3 to make them smooth, and hit 1 to go back to this normal state. So just like that. And you can add like multiple objects. So I can add like a raptor, and it's pretty big, so I'm just gonna select it and hit R to scale it down. And you have these objects, these animals supposedly. So yeah, and you have some other pretty cool stuff. So if I go back to content browser, and inside the I can scale this down. Inside the modeling submenu, you have bipeds. So you have clothing, you have props, and you have vehicles. So you have a fancy car here. So just zoom out and hit R and scale it. I have to select the tires as well. So hold down shift, select all of them, and scale them down, just like that. Hit F. And by the way, if you're zoomed out and you select an object and you want to frame that object, you can hit F. So it's a very useful shortcut if you zoom out, or sometimes you lose your view. So sometimes you go ahead and lose your view, or you can't get, find your things, your objects. You just hit F and it'll frame to the objects that are in the scene. Actually, this is kind of interesting because if I delete this, you have the dinosaurs, or at least the animals from that age, and you have a fancy car, which looks pretty, looks like millions of ages, millions of years between them. But yeah, so and we have weapons and stuff, and we have, very interestingly, paint effects, which is a very powerful tool of Maya for, it's just like painting. You just paint everything, and you have grass. So if I go into grasses, you just take one grass, select it, and then you can paint it here. So you can paint the grass, and there you've created some grass. So Control A for the attribute editor, go to grass Bermuda and just scale it up by using the global scale. And we will be doing a dedicated video on paint effects and animating them and having wind and everything. But yeah, so you have like hair, you have pencils, you have trees, you have tree mesh. So yeah, you have all of these cool objects that you can use inside of Maya. And I'm just gonna quickly, guys, at the end of this tutorial, I'll show you guys how to create a simple, like a few trees, just like a forest inside of Maya using paint effects. So let's just get started. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is go into the content browser again and click on the tree mesh, and I'm just going to take a tree, a medium one. So basically you have all these trees, right? So I'm just going to take medium and just drag it here so you have the tree, right? And if I hit F, you can see that we have it here, but it's not a mesh right now. It's not like polygons. It's just some, some nerves and some lines. So in order to convert this to a polygon object, first I'm just going to go and scale it. You can't scale it from here. You can also go into the oak tree and scale it from here. Alright, so don't want to make it that big. And the one thing that I will say is that you don't have to understand what I'm doing right now. I'm just gonna do it so that you can brag to your friends about, you just went through a 30-minute Maya basics tutorial and you want to show that you've learned something from it. So this is the kind of thing that I'm going to show you guys so that you can brag to your friends about it. Alright, so this is not a mesh actually. So in order to convert it to a mesh, you need to go into modify, convert, and paint effects to polygons. Now it is converted to mesh, and if I hit 6, you can see the texture and the leaves and everything. So the texture mode is actually here. But now I want to render this out. So but then the Arnold renderer won't just let me. So for the rendering, we'll be using Arnold. So if you click here, Arnold is a standard and an industry standard renderer for pretty much every 3D software. It's available, but right now it just comes built in with 3ds Max and Maya. So we're going to be using that. And if you want to create a light, you go to Arnold and you have this sky dome, for example. And if I want to see the viewport, there are two ways. You can go into the Arnold render view and just click on this play button, and now you will have your object inside the scene. But you can see that it's not very well textured because paint effects was meant to be used with the Maya software, so you just have to change the textures for this. So in order to change the textures, we have to go into the HyperShade or the material editor of Maya. So if you click here, and again, you don't have to understand this. I'm just going to do it for the purpose of the project that we'll be doing, and we will be doing dedicated videos about the HyperShade and everything. Alright, so we have the oak material and we have the leaf material. So I'm just going to click on the leaf material. As you can see, it was not shown in the render view. So if I go again, you can see that it's just showing some planes. So I'm just going to click on this and click on show the connections. So you have a bunch of nodes which you don't have to understand. The thing is, we have this material, right? And it is a simple Maya material which we need to convert it to an Arnold material. So in order to convert it to an Arnold material, first you need to create an AI standard surface, which is the Arnold material. Hit tab, type in AI standard surface, and again, you don't have to know it, just do what I'm doing and you'll understand. Alright, so we have this. So the base color is here, which goes to the color. So I'm just gonna click and drag it to the base color. And for the transparency, we have this object, right? We have the alpha here. It's actually a leaf PNG that you can also replace it with your, favorite leaf texture, but we have it here. So what I'm going to do is just move it here closer. I'm just going to take the alpha channel for this and put it into the opacity channel of the AI standard surface material in order to create the transparency. So just select the alpha and link it to the RGB value. So what I did was I just linked the alpha to the RGB values of the AI standard surface material, and that is basically it. So I'm just going to take this material and I want to apply it to the leaves. So I'm just going to select leaves and right click on this and assign material to viewport selection. But then you can see that it's just doing the same thing. So we need to turn on here's a little option. If you select this and you go into the leaf and there's an Arnold tab, you have to turn off the opaque value. So it'll basically, use it's basically used for, transparent objects. So if I go back into Arnold render view and I preview this again, you can see that we can see the leaves properly. But then you can see that the tree trunk shader is looking a little weird, reflective and all, and we're going to be recreating that one as well, just like we did for the leaves. So now you can see that the leaves are looking proper. I'm just going to go back and adjust the material for the trunk. So go back to the HyperShade, click on this oak and click here. So we have the material for the trunk. And what I'm going to do is I'll just go and hit tab and AI standard surface again, enter, and I'm just gonna go ahead and delete this and just link this color to the base color of the AI standard surface material. We don't want specular, so I'm just gonna drag it down to 0 and select this and right click, assign material to selection. Alright, so then we have this here, and I'm just gonna hit 3 on this to make it smoother, so it'll be a lot more smoother. So now if I go into the Arnold tab and preview this, we will be having our objects behaving properly. So we have the texture for the tree and we have the leaves texture properly. So now it's just a matter of distributing this object into like a little mini forest. So I'm just gonna go ahead and close this, and I will delete if I go to the outliner, I'll delete the dome light, and I'm just going to group these two. So go ahead or combine them, select them, go to mesh and combine. So it's basically one object, and combining objects are different from grouping objects because it will just turn it into one single mesh, right? So now for distributing this object, this tree, I'm just going to be using the mesh tool inside of Maya, which I've already done a tutorial. I'll put a link in the description, but I will do some future tutorials as well. So just click on mesh and you will have all of these objects. So if I go into the outliner, select mesh, hit Control A, go to the distribute node, you can go ahead and set the type to grid and increase the distance between them, just like that. And if the values doesn't go too much, you can just type the value that you want. So I want 60, sorry, for the distance Z, I want like 26. And now if I look at it from this view, you can see that we have a mini sort of jungle, but the distance between them is a little too much. So I'm just going to select mesh again and bring them closer, and here as well, just like that. So yeah, Control A and close the outliner, and I'm just going to shift right click and add a plane and scale this up just like that. And now I want to create the lighting. So we have the Arnold Physical Sky, which is a very physical sort of looking light. So if I go into the render view again, and if I play this, you will see that we'll be having our object, but then, you know, it's pretty dark here. So I'm just gonna go to the outliner, select the AI dome, Control A, go to the light shape, and click on color. And here we have intensity, so make them brighter. And you can also change the elevation, so which direction will it be, and the azimuth. The azimuth is basically controlling, sorry, the elevation is controlling, like, is it sunset or the sun is up, so you can rotate and see where the sun is. And you can also go increase the elevation as if the sun is over top of these objects. And yeah, so that's basically it. And if you just let it, it will just keep on refining. And you know, let me get like a better view of this, so a close-up sort of shot here. You can also go to the here to view, window, and 3D manipulation, turn it on. It'll basically act as your viewport. So just get closer here and just like this. And if you let it, it will just keep on refining and refining. And if you want to take a render of this, you just stop here and go into the render settings. I'm gonna go with the size to be like a full HD 1080p. And go to the Arnold settings. We're going to be taking a look at these render settings, but for now just do this, 4 and 3 for the diffuse, and click on render and wait for it to be rendered. So I'm just going to let this render, and I'll be back when this is done. Alright, so our render is done. It took some time, but it's definitely looking really nice. So you can see the leaves are pretty nice looking, and we have this physically accurate lighting with the physical sky of Arnold. And you can give them some, you know, some exposure and some contrast, you know. But then, yeah, that is how you do like a very simple effect. I just wanted to show you guys something cool to kind of give you some motivation to go ahead and play around with Maya and play around with some paint effects and some stuff to be able to, you know, do something like this. So yeah, that pretty much concludes the basics tutorial, the part 1 for the introduction of Maya. I hope you guys learned something from it, and I know we talked a lot about a lot of things, and it makes sense that you don't understand certain things or a lot of things. You can rewind the video, or if you missed anything, you can ask a question in the comment section for this tutorial, and I'll be more than glad to answer them. And I will be making the next parts and talking about every aspect of Maya. And hopefully you've learned something from this, and if you did, it'll mean a world to me if you go ahead and subscribe to my channel and like the video, share it with your friends. And if you want to support me, support me to create and to do more of these awesome tutorials, you can go ahead and support me on my Patreon page, which I will be sharing some other cool stuff as well, and some project files and everything with you guys. Alright, so this was today's tutorial. I hope you learned something from it, and until the next one, enjoy working.